A few more people sign on. We should have a packed virtual house this evening. We're still signing on, so we're just waiting to that to stabilize a bit, and we'll get going in a minute or two. Good evening, I'm Garrett Livermore, Executive Director here at Cornell Cooperative Extension of Herkimer County, and this is our uh, Rooted in Resilient Homesteading Skills for Beginners series. Tonight's program is Gardening for Self-Sufficiency. So what we'll be looking at is doing maximum food production for your garden so that you can provide as much nutrition for your family as possible. So that's the focus, and we'll be walking through that tonight. I want to start with a quote. This is Joan Gussow, um, who, oops. All right. We have to be responsible to ourselves and the planet. That is the best most of us can do most of the time, is to shorten the chain from the farm to our table. We have forgotten that, for some reason, I keep losing my share. I don't know why it's doing that. Every time someone admits, I have to reshare it for me to see it, Jen. I'm not seeing.
Because it looks fine on our end.
Okay, but I'm not seeing it. That's weird.
You're not seeing your slides?
I'm not seeing my slides.
Huh. Do you want to stop sharing and then start again?
Yeah, why don't I do that? Stop share. There, I can see it. We have forgotten that food comes from the land. If we do not learn again, we die. Joan Gussow was a famous author and educator, one of the originators of the local foods movement. She just passed away last month. So this is a good memorial to her. Okay. So tonight we're going to look at some key principles of gardening. This will be a little bit of review from the last gardening program, but not much. Some resilient garden practices. A lot of this is drawn from this book that's on the screen, The Resilient Gardener, Food Production and Self-Reliance in Uncertain Times. It's a highly recommended book. It will be on the list of resources that you get in tomorrow's email, along with resources to learn more. So just again, to plug our own resources here at Cornell, there's a lot that is available to you as gardeners. The Cornell Garden-Based Learning website, Vegetable Varieties for New York Gardeners, which is a publication of tested vegetable varieties that work in our climate, in our soils, as tested by gardeners from across upstate New York. It's a publication, it's a PDF. You'll get a link to it tomorrow. The New York Seed to Supper program is active in our communities, teaching people how to garden and how to prepare nutritious, healthful, delicious foods for their families. And also here locally in Herkimer County, we have a crew of Master Gardener volunteers who are standing by, waiting to help you with any garden problems you have. We have 4-H programs for families and children to get them involved in gardening and other activities, as well as soil testing to make sure your soil is good and prepared to grow food for you this season. So resilient gardening is our topic for tonight. And resilient gardening is one that looks at it adapts to changing conditions and uncertainties, such as the weather, changes in species, such invasive species that come in that may attack or change the growing conditions, economic changes. We've all been looking at the price of eggs and the rising price of food in general. And prioritizes self-reliance over dependence on commercial sources. So what we're looking at doing is getting you equipped so you can garden, and you can garden more or less independently of the commercial system as time marches on. And that balances sustainability, food security, and efficiency. So we're looking at making it not only sustainable, but high quality nutrition, what's going to feed you and your family the best, and efficiency, how you can do this with the least effort and get the most results. Food security is something that's a real counter to what we're experiencing now because it reduces reliance on uncertain supply chains. You may remember during the COVID epidemic that milk became unavailable and then there was too much of it and it was getting dumped, and that food and other things were scarce on the shelves. It's going to build you reliable access to fresh foods, and it's going to help support a balanced diet with fresh organic options for you so that you can have a nutrient-rich, chemical-free produce. Some of the benefits of it economically, it's going to provide a low-cost access to quality food that's going to be it's not immune from inflation, much less influenced by inflation and supply concerns. It's going to build self-reliance so that you know more about how to produce your own food and can grow food that will sustain you into the future. And it's environmental benefits that benefit everyone, not just you, but your neighbors and the community. We have a very high reliance on commercially produced seeds and fertilizers. When you go to the store, for example, a big box store, and you want to buy a tomato plant to grow in your backyard, those tomato plants are grown either in other countries or in completely other parts of the world. They're not well adapted to this part of the U.S., but they can be grown commercially much more readily in a southern warm climate. They may also bring pests and plant diseases from those areas. So by producing our own, we're avoiding all those problems. And we do, have to take into account in this day and age a backup source of food in the event of disasters or economic downturns. And this minimizes food transportation. That's beneficial to us for a few ways. One, it cuts down on the number of diesel trucks that are going back and forth across the country. But also, by minimizing the food transportation, you will get your food quicker and it will be more nutrient dense. From the time a tomato is picked off the vine or a bean is picked off the vine, it starts to lose nutrition. And by the time it gets to you, if it's 2 or 3 weeks later, it could have a 20, 30, or even 40% loss of nutrient value. So you want to, as much as possible, keep that supply chain very short and ideally in your backyard. So Joel Salatin, another author, is a big proponent of this. This is a quote from him. Food security is not in the supermarket. It's not in the government. True food security is in the historical normalcy of picking it in abundant times, building that in-house larder, and resting easy knowing that our little ones are not dependent on next week's farmer's market or the electronic cashiers at the supermarket. I compare it to having money in the bank, that you have food, stocked away. It gives you a brief respite from at least that worry. So some of the things we're going to talk about and have been talking about, so I want to review them. We talked about this a little bit last time. One of the things is you want to look at your soil as a long-term investment. You want to add organic matter. You can compost your kitchen scraps, your yard waste. You can purchase compost from Herkimer Oneida solid waste. That will add organic matter. So you can, we'll talk more about that in terms of the actual numbers and things in our regenerative gardening session. You want to practice crop rotation. You want to move your crops around from year to year. Don't plant them in the same place from time to every year. And I'll talk a little bit more about that tonight with an example of a problem that comes up. You want to avoid chemical inputs. Some chemical things are fine to use, but you need to follow the label and use as minimally as possible because chemicals have a tendency to build up in soils. They break down microbes and also can negatively impact the soil structure that supports plant growth. And you also want to encourage soil microbiology. As research goes on, it's been found that the microbes in the soil, including the fungal chains, bacteria, are things that help plant grow and add nutrients. And you want to support that. Managing water resources is not just preserving water, but water in our environment is very prevalent, and we want to be able to manage it for the best use of the garden. So one of the things one of the things that is a reality for gardeners in this area is sometimes we have very wet summers and everything is washed out, and sometimes we have very dry summers and we have to water to keep things alive. So you want to, as much as possible, think about soil moisture retention, how you're going to keep things damp. One way we do that is the use of mulch and ground cover. So you make sure that there's very little bare ground shown because that mulch, whether it's straw or cardboard or another substance, will help keep the moisture in the ground. It'll also help suppress weeds because that's another issue that really is a problem that we will talk about in the garden management session. You can implement drip irrigation is a convenient way because once you have drip irrigation, which is essentially long hoses with holes in them that you turn on a tap and let it go for an hour or so and it drips out. That is a very easy way to water and very low labor input once you've got that set up. Choose natural and naturalized plants. And then if you do have, like actually I have this problem, I have a stream that when it rains heavily runs right across my garden and runs across my backyard and runs across my garden. So I have to build a swale, which is essentially a ditch, it's a shallow ditch through the center of the garden so it channels the water so it goes through and doesn't inundate my whole garden. So another thing that's important about a resilient gardening practice is to plan for failure. And that may sound counterproductive, but you want to think about what the problems may be, anticipate them, and have backup plans. So one thing to do with plants is to plant more than one variety, so you have a backup. You can succession plant. Succession planting is planting the same crop, say beans, a week or two apart. So have your whole row, say your row is 30 feet long. You do 10 feet at the beginning, 10 feet 2 weeks after that, and then 10 weeks, 2 weeks after that. Then you have a long supply chain of beans coming in all spaced throughout the summer. So it builds your overall harvest. Plus, it also, in case one of them doesn't work out, it gives you a little bit extra insurance. Monitor for pests and disease. This is an evergreen issue. We get a lot of insect pests and particularly fungal diseases because we've had such damp summers. So monitor for them, treat promptly. If you don't know what it is you're looking at, but you see that the plant is having a problem, the best thing to do is take a quick cell phone photo of it and send it to herkimer@cornell.edu and ask for a master gardener consultation, and we'll help you figure that out and how to treat it. And also another reality here is deer love your garden as much as you do. So protect your garden against deer and potentially other poachers of foods like raccoons and skunks. We'll talk a little bit more about specific strategies for that in the garden management session towards the end of this series. Um, Garden planning is and documentation is very important. It doesn't matter what you do. You can buy an app. You can subscribe to an app. As I was looking at thinking about doing, it got a little expensive. Or you can do what my 96-year-old mother-in-law does and has done for many, many years, which is she draws out her garden chart on a piece of cardboard that they stick in men's shirts. I don't know how she got started doing that, but that's what she's done all these many years. Now she has a hard time because she's a widow finding the cardboard. So I have to provide it for her. And she has, oh, it's well over 50 years of documents in her garden shed of where she planted what when. And that was important to her. And it's important to us because she can see there where things were, and she noted on it when she planted, when she harvested, and those things that didn't work out. So she would then, not plant that variety or not or do something else differently. She also kept a seed inventory, and then we never really wrote down the end of season review. It probably would have been a good idea to do that. But working with her, we when we put the garden to bed, we do a little review and we'd figure out what we were going to do for the next year. And sometimes we jotted that down, and sometimes we didn't. So I'm going to talk about some key crops, but one thing to think about is low maintenance, high yield crops. What can you do, plant that will provide the most bang for your, time, your effort, um, and give you a good supply to feed your family, perhaps to trade with neighbors. So some of the things you can do aside from the other crops we're going to talk about, but garlic. Garlic is a very good crop to grow in this climate. In fact, this area of the Mohawk Valley is famous for producing seed garlic that is used across the U.S. and other localities. And garlic is planted on an individual clove basis in the fall. October, November is a typical time to plant it. And it overwinters and then it starts growing in the spring. And mine have just started shooting up now that the snow is gone. And it will grow through the season. In the spring, in late May or June, it will form a scape, which is a curly-Q-like thing, which is a delicious if they are roasted on your barbecue or even pan roasted with some olive oil and salt. And then they're ready for harvest in late July. And then you can use that bed for a short-term growth like a Swiss chard or another green. But that's a great way to utilize space. It's very low maintenance once it's established, and it's used in a lot of different cooking. Similarly, onions are also pretty low maintenance. Onions you can grow, you can buy them in what's called sets or plants, which are small bulbs that will grow out into big bulbs. Um, those go in early in the season. They can be planted as soon as you can work the soil. And by the September, October, you have a winter's worth of onions, perhaps even a whole year's worth that you can put in your food storage area. Herbs can be used for a variety of different purposes, including medicine, um, culinary use, even cosmetics. And they tend to be fairly easy to grow, and they're also great utilizers of kind of space you don't know what to do with. You have a certain number of plants that almost fill up a row, but not quite. So you have like 4 or 5 feet at the end of the row. You can plop some herbs in there. You can also use them as borders, like basil as a border with your tomatoes, etc. And then think about things that are perennials that you plant once and grow and produce food and require little attention after that. Raspberry and blackberries, reebs as they're called. If you have a little bit of extra property, and it doesn't have to be much, a couple hundred square feet, you can plant some raspberries and blackberries, get a patch going that will take over that spot, but it will provide you with berries in the season, a nice flavorful break from vegetables. Similarly, fruit trees and nut trees, when you plant them once, are a little bit of an investment to get started. Um, but you can grow them, and then apple trees in particular are very long lived and can be high producers, and can be used the apples can be used for a variety of purposes. You can grow them as hand apples, which you eat straight off the tree. You can grow them as storage apples, which last a long time, and then cooking apples, and cider apples if you want to make either soft cider or this hard cider. Um, but there's a little bit more of an investment both in time and the effort of getting them established. But once they're set up, they will go for long periods of time. Apple trees in particular. I'm a historian by training, and one of the ways you can see old homesteads is the old apple trees. And sometimes the apple trees look like they're, going to die any minute, but they look like that for 50 or 60 years. And another resilient gardening practice that's really important to think about is your own labor and effort and what you can do to minimize that. Because let's face it, we all have a finite amount of energy, and gardening can be hard work. So it's really important to think smart. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in the garden management uh, session later in the series, but it's something to start thinking about, because a lot of the tools that we use that you buy in big box stores or that you may have hanging around are really very poorly designed for garden purposes. So that tool on the left is called a scuffle hoe. It's for weeding. This was a revelation to me. I have one of these. I've always used an old-fashioned hoe that I think I inherited from someone, with standard, metal facing down, um, metal blade. That's a very inefficient and hard-working tool to weed with. A scuffle hoe, like you see on this one on the left, if you catch again, you have to keep after it, but if you get the weeds young, it goes just beneath the surface and it cuts off the weeds at their roots. So you can very quickly weed a whole garden with that if they're young weeds. And it's a minimum of effort. It's actually kind of fun, and it saves you time and energy. The tool the gentleman is using on the right is called a broad fork, and that's for ground prep. Um, as a kid, my mother had a garden, and I was responsible for turning it over in the spring. And turning it over was literally a shovel at a time, digging down, flipping it over, digging down, flipping it over, and then raking it out to try to get it to break up the clods. A broad fork is driven into the ground. You actually step on that blue piece there in the center, and then you pull it back and forth with the long arms. That leverage gives you a tremendous amount of power with limited energy input. So it's a very quick and easy way to start in preparing your ground. You don't need an expensive tiller or mechanized equipment. So if you have a small space, it's very cost efficient to do it that way. Hand tools are another important thing to think about. Um, the cheap hand tools you get from the big box stores. The trowel, like the one on the right, you dig it in and then you use it for a day or so, and all of a sudden it's bent off and it loses the blade. A high quality tool will last a lot longer. It will be much cheaper in the long run, and they have multiple purposes. So the one on the left is a small trowel. It's also called a hori knife. You'll see these, and you'll see them at big box stores as well, with the plastic handle, but they're perfectly fine. It has a number of different purposes. You see the edges are serrated. That's so you can weed with it. You get under the weeds and you cut it just like the scuffle hoe. It also has a scale on it so you can measure how deep. If you're planting something, you want to plant it 4 inches deep, you go to 4 inches. If you want to plant 2 inches deep, go to 2 inches. It's a very quick and easy way to keep that straight and to better manage your garden. And this is something, a tool like this, you just always have it handy. If you have a place that's close by the garden or even in the garden, you can hang it. It's worth its weight in gold to be able to grab it and address problems right away when you see it, rather than have to run back to the shed, look for it, where it might be. Is it in the bucket with the garden tools? Is it up on the shelf? Have it with you at all times. Um, you're gonna have to move things around. So think of eh, have a wheelbarrow, a cart, if you have a riding lawnmower, a cart that hooks up to the back, moving material around easily is very important, particularly in the first stage of the garden where you're moving soil and compost around and such. Um, the cart on the left is called a garden cart. It's modeled after the old Garden Way garden carts, which were made in Troy, no longer made there, but you still see them on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. One of those will last you a lifetime and is tremendously handy. Finally, in terms of tools, you have to think of your own comfort. None of us are getting any younger, and you spend a lot of energy in the garden. And how can you best manage that energy? And one of the ways to put the energy into the garden rather than into your body, trying to keep your body from being sore, is doing things like having a kneeling pad, a simple kneeling pad, or this kind of garden bench. I like it. I have one. It goes two ways. So the woman on the left is doing it in the kneeling position, face down. So it gives you some padding, so your knees aren't right up against the soil, and it keeps you up off of that. Or you can flip it around. You can sit on it. So if you're dealing with a bigger plant, you can work away at it and still remain comfortable. But think of your own comfort because you want to preserve your body as well as grow things. All right, so now we're going to get into some cornerstone crops. These are the crops that provide the most nutritional bang for the buck for your time and effort, and that in the event of major disruption of food supply are important things to have around. And we'll start with this quote from Michael Pollan. The Omnivore's Dilemma is the book he wrote. He's written several books now about local foods. Corn is a greedy crop, as farmers will tell you. And corn is what we will be starting. Although we're going to start with potatoes. Excuse me. Potatoes are probably the all-star of this concept of resilient gardening. Potatoes provide the highest calories per square foot of any garden crop. And although we're kind of culturally conditioned to avoid calories, to go to low calories, when you're hungry and you need to feed yourself, calories are what are going to satisfy you. Calories are going to provide the energy for you to do your daily tasks. So you want to have a good, strong base of calories. And potatoes are a crop that will provide that, not just in the largest density, but also in the least effort per density. And they have significant amounts of protein. They are the second highest after legumes. They're high in vitamin C and essential minerals. They're rich in antioxidants. And this shouldn't be a surprise because many countries rely on potatoes as the base of their food chain. The Irish potato famine was caused by an over-reliance on potatoes. And then when the blight came in and various things with the British, uh, it caused a starvation. Um, so they're amongst the easiest crops to grow. They yield a great return per hour of work. And you might want to think about that if you're thinking about resilient gardens. How much work are you going to put in and how much you're going to get out? Because you can think about, I like to grow certain varieties of tomatoes that are very good as salad tomatoes or just as plain. But I put a lot of effort into them, and they are a seasonal crop that make my summer, but they don't last long unless I blend them into sauce, and then it's not really I could be using any tomato for that. But potatoes you put the effort in, you're going to get a great return, and it can store. They're also well adapted to a variety of soil types, and they tolerate poor conditions. It's not ideal to grow them in poor conditions, but they tolerate them. And finally, some of these crops, even tomatoes, if you're going to make tomato sauce, you have to have the various tools to cut and process the tomatoes. You have to, cook them on the stove. You have to can them or freeze them. There's a significant investment. Potatoes are easily processed by hand, harvested by hand, processed and stored in a cool place, and they last for months and months. So minimal effort, maximal return. So some things to think about when planting potatoes. my mother-in-law never likes to plant potatoes because she can buy them in the grocery store. I like to grow potatoes because I like to get the different flavors, and I like the satisfaction of growing my own food. Some things to think about. One of which is there's a great temptation right now under the kitchen sink or wherever you store potatoes of several people on this call, I'm sure. There are a bunch of potatoes that are struggling to grow and they're sending out their tendrils trying to look for light. Um, and although you can plant store-bought potatoes, there's some very strong cautions. One is those plants that are now struggling to grow. If you look at the potatoes themselves, they're shriveled and shrunken because they've used a lot of that energy to put out those shoots. They will grow and produce some plants, and they will produce some potatoes, but it will be a much lower yield than seed potatoes in good condition. The other thing is that sometimes those store-bought potatoes, supermarket potatoes, are sprayed with a substance, a chemical to stop them from sprouting. So that's counterproductive for us who are trying to grow them. And finally, you may be introducing problems into your garden by bringing in potatoes that are not certified disease-free. Potatoes, although generally hardy, have a number of diseases that can be problematic. And when they're brought in and they're soil-borne, they can be there and last a long time. So just some things to think about. We'll talk about some varieties, but I really encourage you to buy seed potatoes from a good vendor, but any seed catalog will have them. Um, and sometimes hardware stores have them or other stores. Failing that, I would buy potatoes from a farmer's market because it's a local variety and grown locally, probably under good conditions, but really encourage you to buy seed potatoes. You can plant the ones that are trying to grow. You'll feel good for giving them a chance at life. They will grow, they may produce, but they're not ideal. So how do you plant potatoes? Very simple. You want to loosen the soil to a depth of 6 to 12 inches. You can do that either in the ground, or if you have a very heavy clay soil, you can add compost or light topsoil on top of that, build a raised bed, and put them in there. We're going to talk a little bit about bag potatoes. That's another way of growing potatoes. I'll see that in a minute. So potatoes, because they come in a variety of sizes, you can cut them so long as you have 2 or 3 eyes per plant, so you can cut them into chunks of, 3 or 4 inches in diameter, and then let them cure or just dry, the cut dry for 24 hours or a couple of days, and then you can plant those. You plant 3 to 4 inches deep, 12 to 15 inches apart, in rows 2 to 3 feet apart. Keep watered and mulched, and monitor for plants and diseases and weed growth. When the plants are about 6 inches tall above the ground, you want to hill. And hilling is bringing up the soil from the side or adding loose soil on top, or even mulching with hay or straw. And then you harvest the plant after they flower and they start to die back, they're ready to harvest. If you like new potatoes, which are kind of baby potatoes, you can kind of sneak in and grab some of those prior to that. So after you've hilled maybe, mid-August, you can start to grab out new potatoes for individual meals if that's something you like to do. They're flavorful and they have a nice texture. Once you harvest, and harvest is just digging them up, I kind of look at it as finding buried treasure. You want to put them in a cool, dark place for 2 weeks. You want to avoid direct light. So don't leave them in the sunshine, because what happens is you see this often is they will develop a green layer of chlorophyll, and that is mildly toxic. It's not, I'm sure you could eat enough to hurt you, but generally you want to avoid that. But so that it keeps the quality. So cure it in a cool, dark place. And then once you do that, just store them in buckets. And you can, if you want to put straw in, you can. It helps keep them apart, but generally you just can kind of stack them in buckets, keep them in a cool, dark place above freezing. So my basement is like that. It's about 50 degrees year round. And that works for us. And they are edible and in good condition. Right now, they're just starting to get in here in April, so that the ones that I have left, I'll plant in the garden. I've stopped eating them because they're in a little bit bad condition, but they would still be edible if I needed to eat them. So a neat thing you can do with potatoes is grow them in a grow bag. Yeah, these are purpose bought grow bags. You can see in the picture on the right. But you can fashion your own grow bags. You can upcycle feed bags or dog food bags, um, anything that will contain the soil. I actually saw someone who did it in an Amazon box. So any container to hold the soil will do. You want to fill it so there's about 6 inches of soil. And then the same as planting in the field, you want to get them maybe in each of these bags would be 2 to 3 potatoes, depending upon the size. And then water, you need to water more frequently in a grow bag because it being above the ground, it will evaporate, the water will evaporate quicker. Uh, so keep the water going. As the plants come up, add soil or compost, and it will keep adding potatoes on there. And what you often do is fold those grow bags down, and then as they grow, start to roll them back up and add soil, and it will add soil. And then at the end of the season, you simply dump out the whole thing, and you have your harvest. And you also have all that soil to recycle back in your garden. Soil, potatoes have pests. The one on the left is the Colorado potato beetle. This is a particularly bad pest for potatoes in that they show up one or two at a time. You don't really think much about them. But if you turn your back on them, they will infest your garden and destroy your crop very quickly. And the two telltale signs are the adult, the striped beetle that you see there, and the eggs, which are laid on the back side of the leaf. Um, and to get rid of Colorado potato beetles, other than using harsh chemical insecticides, is manual control, which means if I face this situation, I'd pluck that beetle off and I would put it in a container. I was walking around with soapy water, dish detergent and water, and I would I'd cut that leaf off and I would put it in this, I would destroy it because those are the eggs. And I would go through the entire bed of potatoes looking for those because they will destroy your crop. I I worked in a community garden years and years ago, and one fellow wanted to do nothing but grow potatoes, and he built a beautiful bed, planted potatoes, and he went on vacation, and he didn't check his garden. And by the time he came back a week and a half later, the leaves were all off his potatoes. It was just stalks, and the crop was ruined. On the right, that nasty looking potato is infected with potato scab. It's a very common disease of potatoes. Actually, the potato is perfectly edible. You can peel it and just peel all that stuff off. And the underlying potato is perfectly healthy. It doesn't, you wouldn't know that it ever had any issues, but it is ugly to look at and does affect yields. Potato scab is endemic in the soil. It will always be there. This is the reason you rotate crops, because if you keep growing your potatoes in the same place, the potatoes, the scale, the potato scale will build up, and your potatoes will start to look like this. So you want to move it around. You also want to you also want to look for and grow resistant varieties. It's potato scab. The scab builds up. So this is very similar to a potato that I dealt with or late last year. A homesteading family in Herkimer County had been growing potatoes, the same variety of potatoes for many years. They liked that variety and they saved their seeds. And they did rotate, but they didn't rotate far enough. And they kept the same stock going. So what also happens is plants can change genetically over time, and that plant lost whatever resistance it had to scab. So that is a prime example of why you choose resistant varieties and rotate. Particularly potatoes and tomatoes, solanaceous crops are notorious for this. So, what kind of potatoes do you want to grow? And this is, I'm just going to throw in a couple of different varieties here. This is a new one that I'm growing this year. I have no experience growing with it, but it is a Cornell product done at the lab that's grown at our farms. And it's grown particularly for this region. And it's called Upstate Abundance. It's a very prolific producer of the tubers of the potatoes, and it's very resistant to scab and other diseases. And it also sets the potatoes at the soil line. So if you keep adding soil on top of that, it'll keep producing potatoes. So I'm excited to try this. I don't have any direct experience with it. This is one I do have experience with. It's an old classic, Red Norland. It's apparently makes world famous potato salad. It's a potato that is also great for eating new potatoes fresh from the garden. So this is when you want to go and kind of pluck some and get a sneak peek on the flavor of the potatoes moving forward. And it's got good disease resistant, not quite as strong as the Upstate Abundance, but good. And it's well rated by New York gardeners. One of the links you'll get in the email tomorrow is vegetable varieties as tested by Cornell and rated by New York gardeners. And there's like a 5-star rating, kind of like Amazon. But this was actually, it was started before Amazon. So, but this was well rated by that. Fingerlings, I love to grow fingerlings. You can't really buy them in the supermarket for a reasonable price. They tend to be packaged in small packages and be very expensive, which is unusual because they're actually they're high producers. This is called La Rat. It's a French potato. It's a fingerling, and it's a good winter keeper and disease resistant. Another one that's like this is called Russian banana. It looks very similar to this, a little bit more yellow flesh and a curved nature to the body of the tuber. Corn. So corn is another very important crop in terms of food resilience and growing your own food. But I need to make a strong distinction about what we're talking about. When you say corn, you're probably all thinking of that picture on the right, summer sweet corn. And summer sweet corn is a great treat. We all love to eat it, but it's not really a sustainable or resilient crop. First of all, they're all hybrids. You can grow open pollinated sweet corn, but it has a ripening window of about 2 or 3 hours that it's actually perfectly ripe and sweet. If you go much longer than that, it turns all the sugars turn to starch, and it's very bland tasting. But the hybrids have, really perfected the sweetening, and it holds for days. It's a great crop. It's a lot of fun. It's great to eat, but it's not sustainable. It's not an easy one to keep for over the long haul. However, on the left is flint corn or dried corn. This is a very sustainable crop, and it provides a lot of nutritional bang for the buck. So the values of these are open pollinated flint corn is a good source of calorie and carbohydrates for energy. The protein levels are enhanced by combining with beans or legumes. We're going to talk about that more in a moment. And historically, corn, called maize in other parts of the world, has contributed to major growth in human population, including North America, and specifically the Iroquois or Haudenosaunee people of upstate New York started to cultivate corn, and their population rates levels rose dramatically over a period of a few hundred years, 1,000 or so years ago. And that's right in our valley, where the area between, say, Little Falls and Fort Plain the valley was almost wall to wall corn, beans, and squash being grown to support a very large population of native folk. So corn is a warm weather crop. You want to plant when the soil temperature is at least 50 degrees. You don't want to plant it too soon or it will rot in the field. It's going to once go down to just an inch or two, and then 8 or 12 inches apart in rows 30 inches apart. So you want to do nice set rows, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is to be able to weed between the rows and also to manage pollination. You want to use a nitrogen-rich fertilizer at 6 to 12 inches tall, and again when it tassels out, when the silks come out, um, because it's really important. It needs a lot of nutrition right at that time. Uh, Something to keep in mind with corn is pollination is windborne and not by a pollinator like a bee or another insect. And the plants will interact with one another and crossbreed, and it can cause problems, particularly if you're growing sweet corn and flint corn, or if there's a farm nearby you that's growing field corn for animal feed. Um, if those pollen granules go back and forth, it's gonna spoil one crop or the other, probably yours. So the way to avoid that is, first of all, if you're planting something and there's another corn around, make sure there's at least a 250-foot uh, gap between the species of corn. So if you have a farmer's field right next to you, make sure you're at least 250 feet away from that field. If you want to grow two different varieties of corn, you want to keep their individual identities, either do that distance spacing, or you can also do spacing in time. If you plant them 14 days apart, they will mature at different times and the pollen won't affect one another. So keep that in mind, because that's really an important component. Uh, Corn is something that will last a long time in storage. Field corn, I'm not field corn, flint corn. You want to harvest it when the kernels are hard and dry. You shuck the cobs and the corn, which is just peel the layers off as you would for a sweet corn, and cure it in a dry, cool place. And then you shell it. And shelling it is separating the kernels from the cob. This is a little bit of work, and you can get devices that help you out to do this, either mechanically or just a simple hand tool. But you would probably have to do that if you have any amount that you're going to do. But once you've shelled it, the corn itself can be kept in a glass jar and container, other container, plastic container, and it will last for a very long time. This is a food crop that will last, almost indefinitely. So I don't really have any particular heritage varieties to suggest, but there are several out there um, that you might want to try from your local supplier. Um, but none seem to have a particular growing quality. So another of the cornerstone crops are beans. Beans are rich in protein. They're excellent for a source of that. They're high in fiber, and they're a good source of vitamins and minerals. And particularly, they're important because they interact with other plants that are legumes, which means that they fix nitrogen from the air into the ground. Um, and they provide nutrition for other plants. Uh, Planting them is pretty simple. They're very easy to grow. Plant an inch deep, 2 to 4 inches apart, and at least 24 inches between rows. The soil temperature, they can tolerate somewhat cooler temperature, 55 degrees or so. So they can be one you plant right when you start your garden. With fertilizing them, they are sensitive to nitrogen because they're a nitrogen fixing plant. So you want to avoid high nitrogen fertilizers, because what that does is it encourages them to produce foliage growth, and it kind of holds back their planting, their production of beans themselves. So be careful with the fertilizer. A weak compost tea or a low nitrogen fertilizer, perfectly fine. Watch for aphids and powdery mildew. They're not particularly susceptible, but those would be the two things I'd be concerned about. Dry beans, fresh beans you can just eat right out of the garden. If you think about long-term storage and food security, you want to store them. And shell beans are beans you would eat fresh, kind of like lima beans. Uh, so you're not really going to store them unless you freeze them. Dry beans are relatively easy to process and store. You allow the pods and beans to dry in the vine, so they'll be dry and they'll be like rattles. You can pick up that pod and rattle it. We shell them out so the individual beans and then store them in glass jars or plastic containers. Again, another long-lived crop that will store in your home for a long period of time and be available for food for you. So varieties, there's a lot of good varieties. That picture on the right, that's a historical picture of what's called the scarlet runner bean. It's an heirloom variety that was grown by native people and early settlers throughout the Northeast, also known for the beauty of its flowers. Jacob's cattle is an open pollinated variety that's another well-rated one, and red cranberry. These are all things that you can grow and save the seeds from year to year and have yourself a guaranteed crop. And then finally, in terms of the key plants, squash. Squash is extremely nutrient dense food. It's rich in vitamins A, C, and B. It's a great source of minerals, high in fiber, and it's also antioxidant rich. So it's going to provide a lot of food nutrition, and it has a bonus that people don't think of. The seeds are part of the nutritional package of squash and should be saved and be prepared to be eaten as a food source. Seeds, they're going to provide the fat in this diet. Um, and the fats that seeds provide are very healthy, unsaturated fats with a lot of omega 3 and 6, and they're high in protein, and as well as they can carry, they contain minerals and vitamins. And they are also a treat because the way you process them is you simply you scoop out the pulp and the seeds, rinse them off in a colander so you get rid of the pulp, dry them off, and then the seeds you can just either dry roast in a frying pan or roast it in the oven with some olive oil and salt or garlic powder or other seasoning. And they are a great snack, and they're also extremely healthy. Squash is a warm season crop, so plant when the soil temperature is at least 60 degrees. It's also a long season crop. So you might want to check your calendar and your growing calendar and compare them and make sure you're going to have at least 80 to 100 days to mature. I prefer to plant squash on a hill. So it's about 36 inches in diameter. You plant, and that each hill is 3 to 4 feet apart, and then 3 to 4 seeds on the top of each hill. And it will grow out from there. It's a space intensive crop. It will take up a lot of space. Um, you want to fertilize it consistently through the season with a weak fertilizer like compost tea. Or if you use a commercial fertilizer, like the blue water ones, use it maybe half strength, but do it frequently because it has a high nutritional need. It also attracts a lot of pests. The two most common ones are the striped cucumber beetle on the left and powdery mildew. Um, there are, and we're going to talk about this in the garden management session a little bit more, but there are organic methods of pest control which will not totally wipe out a pest like the beetle, but will suppress their growth, keep after them, mechanically move them off, meaning pick them off and crush them in your fingers or throw them in a jar of soapy water. Uh, Powdery mildew, given our wet, warm climate, has become a real problem in growing squash. Um, there are various techniques of treating plants. Powdery mildew is a fungal-like organism, such as there's a bicarbonate of soda or baking soda solution that one can spray on it. But get after it early because once it gets into the fabric of the plant, you'll see that it's on the surface at first, and it kind of works its way in. And if you don't treat it for, a long time, it becomes fully ingrained. It's very hard to get rid of, if not impossible. So you need to manage those. Harvest and storage is pretty easy. The skin should be hard to the touch. The color is going to be deep and rich with a dull finish. You want to clip off the vine and leave a stub. Don't pull it off the vine because if you pull it off the vine and leave that scar there, that is a place where rot will seep in, and that's where it will spoil first. So leave the stub. You cure it by putting it in a warm room, like your garage or a barn, and let it sit for 2 weeks on a tarp, just let the air flow through it. And then store in a cool, dark place at about 50 degrees. Again, unheated cellar is perfect for it. These last 6 to 8 months in storage, so that they're fully edible. So that's a good one that will get you through almost until the next spring. I would be remiss if I didn't point out what I've just been talking about in terms of these sustainable plants are actually something that the native people, the Iroquois or Haudenosaunee people, knew for generations before us and grew, and they called them the Three Sisters. This is a painting by a man named Ernie Smith, who was Seneca, I believe, from Western New York. His paintings of traditional Iroquois life are at the Rochester Museum and Science Center in Rochester. But they knew this and they took advantage of it. And the way they work together is as interesting as any of the individual plants. By eating these together, you provide a complete protein source because corn is going to provide carbohydrates, but the beans balance that out in terms of the certain essential amino acids. Squash seeds add protein and healthy fats, and together they make a very healthy plant-based diet, as well as the micronutrients you see and vitamin and minerals that all kind of work together. So this is a great way of growing. There is a style called the Three Sisters method of gardening, which is interesting historically. It can be a little challenging to actually get it to work to grow. So if you're going to do that, you might want to try an experimental plot. And if you're interested in doing that, we have a publication. I'll try to remember to link it on growing the Three Sisters garden. I just want to supplement, those are the big crops to think about. I just want to supplement that a little bit with some other things you want to grow. Greens are important because they're very nutrient dense. They're high in vitamins and minerals, low in calories, which is good for us in today's diet. But if you're on a sustenance diet, you want to make sure that you have your calories. But they also, in addition to being nutrient and providing a good source of dietary fiber, they grow easily. Chard is a great example. You can sow it from May to September, so you have harvest throughout the season. You can also, particularly with chard, cut it off and it will sprout back. So one planting will get you a lot of growth and a lot of harvest. Unfortunately, they don't really store very well. They're best eaten fresh, both for nutritional and taste purposes. And storage, you could freeze some of it, but it's not the same. And it requires a freezer. But the storage is best if you think about storage as simply putting it, capturing the seeds and saving them for next season so that you kind of keep that going. We're going to talk about this next week. And that's poultry's role in the garden and in sustainability and resiliency. Poultry, both chickens and ducks, are a great source of protein. They're also really important in terms of managing gardens and garden waste. And I'm going to close with another quote, which is, "Sustainability starts at home in our own backyard." So does anybody have any questions or comments?
So there are no questions in the chat.
Okay, well, remember that you can write us questions at herkimer@cornell.edu and just put, garden question or my name, Garrett Livermore, in the heading, and we can get back to you. Any questions about, growing, starting your own garden, problems in the garden, that's what we're here to help you do. And then we do have other programs in the season coming up. Next week is poultry. So we're going to be talking about chickens and ducks and maybe even some geese. So it's been a delight presenting to you, and thank you all for participating. Oh, and also